The laughter reached her before the words did. Sharp, whispered, cruel, 25, and still untouched. Poor Miss Thorne. 7 seasons and not a single gentleman brave enough to claim her. Perhaps she is simply unchosen. The ladies behind their fans believed she could not hear, but Emiline Thorne heard everything. She always did. She stood near the tall French windows of the Countess of Wexford's ballroom, the candlelight reflecting faintly in the glass beside her. 300 members of England's highest society glittered beneath the chandeliers, yet none stood beside her. Not one. Her gloved hands were folded neatly before her, hiding the careful mending along the seams. Her gown, muddy lavender, had been chosen by her aunt, chosen specifically because it made her look tired, chosen specifically because it made her disappear. Across the ballroom, her cousin Blanche Ashby sparkled in pale blue silk, surrounded by laughing young officers and hopeful heirs. Lady Prudence hovered nearby like a satisfied general surveying a successful campaign. Occasionally her aunt glanced toward Emiline. The look was always the same, a small knowing smile. See what you could never be. Emiline lifted her chin. She had practiced this posture for 7 long years, 7 seasons of standing exactly like this, back straight, face calm, eyes distant, the perfect portrait of a woman who did not care. But inside something had begun to fracture. 7 years. 7 years of whispered insults. 7 years of carefully ruined gowns and poisoned introductions. 7 years of hearing that dreadful word, spinster. At 25, a woman was already considered past her prime. In the brutal mathematics of the marriage market, youth was currency, and Emiline's had long since been spent. The orchestra swelled as couples began another waltz. Laughter drifted through the air like perfume. No one approached her. No one ever did. And yet, tonight someone was watching. Not the casual glance of curiosity she had grown accustomed to. Something sharper. Something deliberate. The strange sensation prickled across the back of her neck. Emiline turned slightly, scanning the ballroom. Nothing. Gentlemen laughed near the refreshment table. Matrons whispered behind ivory fans. The dancers spun across polished floors in perfect circles. No one looked at her, and yet the feeling remained. Beyond the glass doors, hidden in the darkness of the terrace, a man stood perfectly still. The shadows concealed him entirely. From this angle he could see her reflection in the glass while remaining invisible himself. He had chosen the position carefully. He always did. For 7 years. 7 years he had watched her stand exactly as she stood now. Straight-backed, silent, enduring humiliation with a quiet dignity that had fascinated him from the first moment he noticed her. His name was Dashiell Crane, and he was the Duke of Holston. Among England's nobility, a duke stood just below royalty itself. Land, wealth, power. His influence stretched across counties and parliament alike. But power was not what made people fear him. It was his silence. He never danced, never courted, never smiled. Society called him Sungen the Granite Duke, because nothing ever seemed to move him. Yet tonight the granite had finally cracked. 7 years earlier, at a country house in Kent, he had stood outside a sickroom door and witnessed something that had altered the course of his life. His younger sister, Lady Viola, had been dying. Guests had fled the room in terror of the disease consuming her lungs. But one girl had remained, a quiet girl with dark hair and gentle hands. She had sat beside Viola through the night, reading poetry, holding her hand, offering comfort when no one else would. Emiline Thorne. He had watched through the doorway as she whispered softly to his frightened sister. Watched as Viola smiled for the first time in weeks. Watched as Emiline slipped away before dawn without asking for thanks. No one else had noticed, but he had, and from that moment forward, he could not stop watching. 7 years. 7 years observing her quiet suffering. 7 years gathering truths about the woman no one else bothered to see. 7 years waiting. Tonight he would finally act. Inside the ballroom, Emiline felt the walls closing around her. Another burst of laughter echoed behind her. 7 seasons. Poor creature. Practically furniture now. That did it. Her composure cracked. She turned quickly toward the terrace doors. The night air would steady her. It always did. The terrace beyond the ballroom was empty. Cool spring air brushed her face as she stepped outside. Moonlight silvered the rose garden stretching beyond the stone balustrade. For a moment she simply breathed. In. Out. In. Out. You're not supposed to be out here alone. The voice came from the shadows beside her. Deep. Controlled. Commanding. Emiline startled violently and turned. A tall figure stepped forward. Moonlight struck his face. Her breath vanished. Everyone in England knew that face. Sharp jaw. Dark hair, cold gray eyes that rarely softened for anyone. The Duke of Holston. Her knees nearly buckled as she dropped into a hurried curtsy. Your Grace. Stand up. The order was quiet but absolute. She obeyed. Her heart hammered painfully. Why was he here? Why was he speaking to her? You stood in that corner for 3 hours, he said calmly. You danced with no one. You spoke to no one. You did not even eat. She blinked in confusion. How? You push food around your plate at supper, he continued. You eat very little. Your aunt keeps you on careful rations. Shock flooded her. No one had ever noticed. No one had ever looked closely enough. You are mistaken, she whispered. My aunt is very generous. His eyes hardened. Your aunt, the Duke said quietly, is a monster. The words struck like lightning. She has sabotaged every suitor for 7 years. She spreads rumors of madness in your blood. She ensures your gowns are always unflattering. She positions you in the darkest corner of every ballroom. Emiline could not breathe. How could you possibly know? His gaze held hers. I have been watching you. Silence fell between them. For how long? She whispered. The Duke of Holston stepped closer. 7 years. The world tilted. He lowered himself slowly to one knee before her, and Emiline Thorne made a strangled sound of disbelief as the most feared man in England knelt at her feet. Marry me. The word echoed through Emiline's mind like a bell struck too hard. Marry me. The Duke of Holston still knelt before her. Moonlight caught the sharp planes of his face, turning his gray eyes almost silver. Nothing about him looked uncertain. Nothing about him suggested this was impulsive. He looked like a man delivering a verdict he had contemplated for years. Emiline's pulse raced wildly. Your Grace, she whispered, her voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. You cannot mean... My name, he said quietly, is Dashel. The correction was soft but firm. He did not rise. Instead, he extended his hand toward her. Say it. She hesitated. The intimacy of it felt startling. Dashel, she murmured at last. Something flickered across his expression, something dangerously close to relief. I have waited 7 years to hear you say my name. Her breath caught. 7 years. The number pressed heavily between them. I do not understand, she admitted. Why would a man like you watch someone like me? For the first time, his composure shifted. Not weakness, but intensity. Because 7 years ago, he said slowly, you sat beside my dying sister when everyone else ran. The memory returned in a rush. The house party in Kent, the frightened girl coughing blood into handkerchiefs, guests whispering in hallways, servants refusing to enter the room. But Emiline had stayed. She was afraid, Emiline whispered. No one should face death alone. Dashel studied her with an expression so intent it made her uneasy. You held her hand, he said quietly. You read poetry until she slept. His jaw tightened. I stood outside that door and watched you give my sister the only peace she knew in her final weeks. Emiline swallowed hard. I did nothing extraordinary. You did everything. His voice was low, controlled. But beneath the restraint she felt something fierce and protective. After she died, he continued, I noticed you again at church. You cried for her. I barely knew her. Yet you mourned her more sincerely than half the guests who had called themselves her friends. Silence stretched between them. The night air carried the faint music of the ballroom behind the doors. 7 years. The Duke rose slowly to his feet. Now he stood very close. Too close. You asked why I watched you, he said. His voice had dropped, because after Viola died, the world felt empty. His gaze softened slightly. You were the only kindness I saw during that time. Emiline felt strangely exposed beneath his scrutiny. I am not remarkable, she said quietly. You are, he replied instantly. You simply have never been allowed to see it. The certainty in his tone unsettled her. How can you know so much about my life? His expression darkened. I know what your aunt has done to you. Emiline stiffened. She is my guardian. She is your jailer. The words were calm, cold. She steals from your inheritance. Emiline froze. She tells potential suitors that madness runs in your family. A tremor passed through her. She ensures you appear undesirable so no man will question where your dowry has gone. Emiline's heart pounded painfully. That cannot... It can, he interrupted quietly. And it has. His voice carried absolute conviction. How do you know these things? She whispered. Dashel looked toward the ballroom windows. I make it my business to know. The simplicity of the statement frightened her. You investigated my life? I protected what mattered to me. Her breath caught. What matters to you? His gaze returned to her. You! The word landed between them with shocking force. She shook her head slightly, overwhelmed. This is madness. Perhaps. His tone remained calm, but it is honest madness. He stepped closer.
7 years I watched you endure cruelty without losing your kindness.
7 years I told myself I would intervene only when the time was right. 7 years I forced myself to wait. His hand lifted slowly, hovering near hers. I could not approach you when you were 18. My attention would have destroyed you. The honesty in his voice stunned her. So I waited until you were strong enough. Strong enough for what? She asked. For me. Emiline's breath faltered. Behind them, the ballroom doors opened briefly as laughing guests spilled onto the terrace before retreating again. The sound reminded her suddenly how dangerous this moment was. If someone sees us, they will. He said it calmly, almost deliberately. Her eyes widened. You mean for people to see? I intend for everyone to see. His gaze sharpened. Tonight ends your humiliation. Tonight ends your aunt's control. And tonight, he finished quietly, England learns that Emiline Thorne is no longer invisible. Her heart thundered. You would risk scandal. I would burn down society itself if it meant freeing you. The intensity of the statement left her speechless. His hand finally closed gently around hers, warm. Steady. Tell me no, he said softly. If this terrifies you, say the word and I will walk away. His eyes searched hers. But if you say yes, his voice deepened. I will never allow anyone to make you feel small again. The sincerity in his gaze shook something deep inside her. For 7 years she had been told she was unworthy, unwanted, invisible. Yet this powerful, terrifying man looked at her as though she were priceless. Her voice trembled. You truly watched me for 7 years? Every season. Every ball. Every garden party. A faint softness entered his eyes. I even purchased your paintings. Her breath caught sharply. My watercolors? All of them. Why? Because they were the only place you allowed yourself to be honest. Emotion rose painfully in her chest. 7 years of loneliness. 7 years of quiet endurance. 7 years believing no one noticed her suffering. And all this time, someone had. Dashiell squeezed her hand gently. Come back inside with me. She hesitated. Why? His gaze hardened. Because when we walked through that ballroom together, a faint, dangerous smile touched his lips. Every person who ever mocked you will understand exactly how wrong they were. Her heart raced. One step through those doors would change everything. Society would explode with gossip. Her aunt would rage. There would be no turning back. Dashiell studied her face carefully. Emiline, he said softly. Do you trust me? She looked at him. At the man who had waited 7 years. The man who knew her secrets. The man offering to destroy anyone who hurt her. Slowly she nodded. Yes. His expression changed instantly. Not triumph. Something deeper. Relief. He offered his arm. Then come with me. Together they turned toward the ballroom doors. And the moment Emiline placed her hand on the arm of the most feared duke in England, 300 lives inside that glittering room were about to change forever. The ballroom doors opened. Conversation stopped. It happened almost instantly, as though an invisible hand had swept across the room and silenced every voice at once. 300 guests turned and stared. The Duke of Holston had just entered the ballroom. That alone would have been remarkable. But the true shock came a heartbeat later, because he was escorting Emiline Thorne. His arm was firm beneath her gloved hand, his posture calm and commanding as he guided her down the marble steps toward the center of the room. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a breeze disturbing still water. Fans fluttered open. Whispers erupted. The Duke. With her. The spinster from the corner? Emiline felt every eye in the room burning into her back. For 7 seasons she had stood invisible among these people. Now she was the center of their attention. Her heart pounded painfully, but she kept her chin high. Dashiell's hand rested lightly at the small of her back. The touch was subtle, but it carried unmistakable possession. Across the room, Lady Prudence saw them. Her face drained of color. She began pushing through the crowd immediately, Blanche trailing close behind, her pretty features twisted with confusion. Emiline! Lady Prudence's voice cut sharply across the murmuring ballroom. What on earth do you think you were doing? The orchestra faltered. The music stopped entirely. Every guest leaned closer. Dashiell halted mid-stride. Slowly he turned. His expression was polite, cold, utterly lethal. Lady Ashby, he said. The title fell from his lips like ice. Lady Prudence forced a brittle smile, though panic flickered behind her eyes. Your Grace, she said breathlessly, dipping into a curtsy. I was unaware my niece had made your acquaintance. Her gaze darted sharply toward Emiline. The silent command was clear. Step away from him, now. But Emiline did not move. Dashiell's hand remained steady against her back. I have done more than make Miss Thorne's acquaintance, the Duke replied calmly. A ripple of curiosity spread through the guests. Lady Prudence laughed nervously. Yes, well, society can be terribly confusing for a girl like Emiline. She often misunderstands. Miss Thorne, Dashiell interrupted, his voice suddenly carrying across the entire ballroom, has accepted my proposal of marriage. The silence that followed was absolute. It felt as though the air itself had vanished. Several ladies gasped aloud. A gentleman dropped his champagne glass. Lady Prudence stared at him as if he had spoken another language. I beg your pardon? The Duke's gray eyes hardened. There has been no misunderstanding. His voice grew colder with every word. Miss Thorne will become the Duchess of Holston. Shock rolled through the crowd like thunder. Blanche's mouth fell open. Lady Prudence looked from the Duke to Emiline and back again, her composure cracking completely. This is absurd, she snapped. Your Grace must realize my niece is not suitable. She is perfectly suitable. His tone did not rise, yet the room seemed to shrink beneath its weight. Perhaps you are unaware, Lady Prudence continued quickly, that Emiline suffers from certain unfortunate weaknesses. Murmurs of agreement spread among nearby matrons. Dashiell's gaze turned glacial. Yes, he said quietly. I am aware. Lady Prudence relaxed slightly, but the Duke continued. I'm aware you have told society she is fragile, that madness runs in her blood, that she is unsuitable for marriage. Each accusation landed like a hammer. The whispers in the ballroom shifted. Uneasy. Curious. Lady Prudence's smile faltered. Your Grace, I do not know what nonsense you have been hearing. I also know, Dashiell continued calmly, that you have been stealing from her inheritance for 7 years. The words detonated across the ballroom. Gasps erupted everywhere. Lady Prudence went white. That is a vile accusation! Is it? The Duke's voice was almost conversational. I have bank ledgers, receipts, servant testimony, 7 years of evidence documenting exactly how you have treated the niece entrusted to your care. The silence became suffocating. Every eye in the room shifted toward Lady Prudence. Blanche's hand slipped from her mother's arm. Lady Prudence's lips trembled. You cannot possibly. Oh, I can. Dashiell stepped forward. His presence was suddenly terrifying. You believed no one was watching. His gaze flicked briefly toward Emiline. But I was. A tremor passed through the room. 7 years, he said quietly. 7 years I observed you humiliate her. Starve her. Sabotage every gentleman who dared approach her. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Did you truly imagine I would allow it to continue forever? Lady Prudence staggered backward. The society ladies who once surrounded her quickly stepped away. No one wanted to be associated with scandal. Blanche stared at Emiline with wide, frightened eyes. Dashiell turned slightly toward the crowd. His hand returned to Emiline's back. My future wife will not return to your household. The declaration echoed through the ballroom. My staff will collect her belongings tomorrow. You will not approach her again. And if you attempt to interfere with her life in any way, his gaze hardened like stone, I will ensure the consequences reach every corner of England. No one spoke. No one dared. Emiline's heart raced wildly. 7 years of humiliation had just been exposed before the entire aristocracy. Dashiell looked down at her. His expression softened slightly. Come, he murmured quietly. We are leaving. He turned toward the doors. This time the crowd parted instantly. Not a single person dared block their path. Behind them, the whispers erupted like wildfire. The Duke. 7 years, he said. Good God, Lady Ashby. But Emiline heard almost none of it, because as they stepped out into the cool night air, Dashiell's hand tightened gently around hers, and for the first time in 7 long years, she did not feel invisible. She felt reclaimed. The carriage door closed with a soft but decisive thud. For the first time that night, the world grew quiet. London's streets rolled past outside the windows, lantern lights sliding across polished wood as the Duke of Holston's carriage moved swiftly through the night. Inside, silence stretched between them. Emiline sat opposite him, her gloved hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her life had been overturned in less than an hour. 7 seasons of humiliation had ended in a single announcement, and now she sat alone in a private carriage with the most feared man in England, the man she had just agreed to marry. Dashiell watched her carefully from the opposite seat. "You are frightened," he said at last. His tone held no accusation, only certainty. "I am overwhelmed," she admitted quietly. "That is understandable." The carriage rocked gently over the cobblestones. Dashiell leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "I've had 7 years to prepare for tonight," he said. "You have had 7 minutes." The honesty startled her. "I do not expect your feelings to match mine immediately." Emiline's heart skipped. "Your feelings?" His gray eyes held hers steadily. "I love you." The words were spoken simply, without flourish, without hesitation. She stared at him in stunned silence. "I realize that is inconvenient," he added dryly. "You hardly know me." "That is not true." His voice softened slightly. "I know more about you than anyone alive." Her pulse quickened. "How?" A faint shadow crossed his expression. "I purchased every painting you sold." Emiline's breath caught. "My watercolors?" "Everyone." She shook her head in disbelief. "Why would you do such a thing?" "Because your paintings were honest." His gaze drifted briefly toward the dark window. "You hid your suffering from society, but you never hid it from the canvas." The carriage lantern flickered. "I watched the way your work changed," he continued quietly. "At first you painted gardens, ballrooms, beautiful places you wished to belong." His voice lowered. "But the last 2 years then your paintings became storms. Dark skies, lonely landscapes, anger." Emiline felt exposed. "I thought no one would buy those." "They were magnificent." He met her eyes again. They were true. Emotion tightened painfully in her chest. For 7 years she had believed no one saw her. Yet this man had studied her loneliness like a language. "You kept them?" she asked softly. "All of them." The carriage slowed slightly as they turned into a quieter street. Dashiell reached into the inside pocket of his coat. "I want to show you something." He withdrew a small folded paper, carefully, almost reverently. He handed it to her. Emiline unfolded it slowly. Her breath caught. It was a sketch, a charcoal drawing, her, standing near a ballroom window, her back straight, her expression distant, the very image of quiet endurance. "You drew this?" she whispered. "No. I commissioned it." Her fingers trembled. "When?" 3 years ago." "Why?" Dashiell leaned back in the seat. His expression held a rare vulnerability. "Because I needed to remember why I was waiting." The carriage fell silent again. Outside, the lamps of Mayfair glowed softly in the night. Emiline stared at the sketch. "I still do not understand something," she said slowly. "What?" "If you loved me. If you saw what my aunt was doing." Her voice wavered. "Why did you wait so long to help me?" For the first time that night, Dashiell hesitated. His jaw tightened slightly. "When Viola died," he said quietly, "I was not a man fit for love." Emiline looked up. Grief shadowed his expression. "I was angry at the world," he continued. "At illness. At God. At everyone who had abandoned her." His hands clenched briefly. "If I had approached you then, I would have overwhelmed you. Possessed you. Perhaps even frightened you." The honesty in his voice startled her again. "So I forced myself to wait. To become someone capable of loving you properly." His gaze softened slightly. "And you had to grow as well." "How?" she asked. "You still believed your aunt might love you." Emiline went still. "That hope had to die first." The words were gentle, but painfully accurate. "You had to realize her cruelty was not your fault. You had to discover your own strength." He nodded toward the sketch in her hand. "And when your paintings changed, I knew you were finally ready." The carriage came to a stop. Dashiell glanced toward the window. "We have arrived." Emiline looked outside. A vast London townhouse loomed before them, 5 stories of pale stone, dozens of lit windows, servants already waiting at the door. Her heart fluttered nervously. "This is your house?" "Our house," he corrected quietly. He stepped from the carriage first, then turned and offered his hand. Emiline hesitated only a moment before taking it. The entrance hall was enormous. Footmen lined the walls. A butler bowed deeply, but Dashiell barely acknowledged them. Instead, he guided her quickly toward the sweeping staircase. "Where are we going?" she asked softly. "There is something you must see." They climbed 2 flights of stairs, down a long corridor. Finally, he stopped before a locked door. "No one enters this room," he said quietly. "Not servants. Not family. Not anyone." He produced a small key. The lock clicked open. Dashiell pushed the door wide. "Except you." Emiline stepped inside and forgot how to breathe. 3 entire walls were covered with paintings. Her paintings, Every watercolor she had ever sold. 7 years of quiet loneliness displayed like treasures in a private gallery. But the fourth wall held something even more startling. Glass cases. Inside them, a ribbon she had once lost at a garden party. A pressed rose she had thrown away. Dance cards no gentleman had ever signed. Her discarded life. Preserved, protected, remembered. Emiline sank slowly to her knees. 7 years. He had been collecting the broken pieces of her life for 7 years. Behind her, Dashiell spoke softly. You were never invisible to me. Her voice trembled. This is madness. Perhaps. He stepped closer. But it is honest madness. She looked up at him through tears. The feared Duke. The Granite Duke, standing there with raw vulnerability in his eyes. You built a shrine to me, she whispered. No. His voice softened. I built proof. Proof of what? His gaze held hers steadily. That you were always worth waiting for. Emiline remained kneeling in the center of the gallery. 7 years of her life surrounded her on every wall. Watercolors she had painted by candlelight in the cold attic room. Scenes of gardens she had never walked through. Ballrooms where she had never danced. Lonely moons and storm-dark skies from the years when hope had begun to die. All of it here. Preserved, treasured, valued. Her hands trembled. I thought no one cared if these existed, she whispered. Dashiell stood a few steps behind her, watching carefully. They mattered, he said quietly. They mattered to me. Emotion pressed painfully against her ribs. You collected every piece of my loneliness. His voice softened. I collected every piece of you. The words should have frightened her. Perhaps they should have felt obsessive. Instead, they made her chest ache with something dangerously close to relief. For 7 years, she had believed she moved unseen through the world. Now she discovered someone had witnessed every step. Still, a faint unease stirred beneath the warmth. She rose slowly to her feet. You built this room before speaking to me even once. Dashiell did not deny it. Yes. You watched my life unfold like a study. His expression remained calm. I protected you. From the shadows. Yes. Emiline turned toward him. But I did not know you. No. The honesty between them hung heavy in the air. And tonight, she continued quietly, you changed my life in front of 300 people. Dashiell's gaze darkened slightly. Would you rather I had not? That is not what I mean. She looked down briefly. I simply need to understand the man I have just agreed to marry. For the first time that evening, uncertainty flickered across his face. You believe me dangerous. I believe you powerful, she replied honestly. And power can be dangerous. Silence stretched between them. Dashiell moved closer. You are not wrong. He stopped a few feet away. My reputation is not an accident. You cultivated it. Yes. Why? Because fear is useful. The answer came without apology. Fear keeps enemies cautious. Fear keeps opportunists away. Fear allows me to control situations before they become threats. His voice lowered slightly. But I never intended you to fear me. Emiline studied him carefully. I do not know if I do. The admission surprised them both. Dashiell's jaw tightened faintly. Tell me what troubles you. She hesitated. You exposed my aunt before the entire aristocracy. She deserved it. Yes. But you also destroyed her life in a single moment. His expression hardened. She destroyed yours for 7 years. That may be true. Her voice softened. But I must still live in a world where such power exists. A quiet understanding passed between them. You wonder if one day I might turn that power on you. The bluntness startled her. I had not phrased it so harshly. But the thought exists. Yes. Dashiell did not appear offended. Instead, he nodded once. That is a fair fear. He turned away briefly, walking toward one of the paintings. Power without restraint is cruelty. His hand hovered near a watercolor of a moonlit garden. I have spent years ensuring I never become that kind of man. How? By remembering what helplessness looks like. His gaze returned to her. I watched you endure it. The room fell quiet again. I would never use my influence to control you, he continued calmly. You will have your own fortune. Your own household authority. If you ever wish to leave, he paused slightly. You will be free to do so. The offer stunned her. You would allow that? If loving you means caging you, then it is not love. His voice was steady. I waited 7 years because I wanted a wife who chose me, not one who was trapped. Emotion rose unexpectedly in her chest. You truly mean that? Yes. Emiline looked around the gallery again. 7 years of careful watching. 7 years of patience. 7 years of restraint. You are a very strange man, Your Grace. A faint smile touched his mouth. You may call me Dashiell. She met his gaze again. Dashiell. The name felt warmer this time. Tell me something honestly. Anything. After watching me all those years, did you ever regret it? His answer came immediately. Never. Not once. Not once. She studied his face. You make it sound easy. His expression darkened with quiet intensity. It was not easy. Waiting rarely is. He stepped closer again. Every season I watched men laugh at you. Every season I watched your aunt diminish you. And every season I forced myself not to intervene too soon. His voice dropped. Restraint is not the absence of desire. It is the control of it. Morning light filtered through tall windows at Holston House. Emiline woke slowly. For a moment she did not remember where she was. The bed was far too soft. The sheets smelled faintly of lavender. A fire burned gently in the hearth despite the spring warmth outside. Then memory returned all at once. The ballroom, the proposal, the gallery, the Duke. Her heart fluttered. A knock sounded softly at the door. Enter, she said hesitantly. A maid stepped inside and curtsied deeply. Good morning, Your Grace. Emiline blinked. Your Grace. The words felt impossibly strange. I believe there has been some mistake. No mistake. Your Grace. His Grace instructed that you are to be treated with every courtesy. The maid moved toward the window and opened the curtains. Sunlight flooded the room. A breakfast tray sat neatly on a small table nearby. Hot chocolate, fresh bread, fruit, more food than Emiline had eaten in a week. During her years at Lady Prudence's house, her throat tightened. His Grace asked that you eat. The maid added kindly. Emiline nodded slowly. After the maid departed, she sat at the small table. The first bite of warm bread nearly brought tears to her eyes. For 7 years she had eaten sparingly so others would not accuse her of greed. Now food was offered without judgment, without shame, without ration. The change felt almost overwhelming. By the time she finished breakfast, another servant arrived. His Grace requests the pleasure of your company in the morning room. Emiline followed the maid downstairs through corridors, larger than Lady Prudence's entire house. Portraits of stern ancestors lined the walls. Servants bowed politely as she passed. It felt unreal. The morning room overlooked a garden bursting with early spring roses. Dashiell stood near the window, reading a stack of papers. He looked up the moment she entered. You slept well? I believe I did. His eyes moved briefly over her face. You look stronger. I had breakfast. A shadow passed across his expression. Good. He set the papers aside. I apologize for beginning the day with business. What kind of business? His gaze hardened slightly. Lady Ashby. The name sent a faint chill through her. She's already attempting damage control. Emiline sank slowly into a nearby chair. That was quick. She is desperate. Dashiell walked toward the desk and handed her one of the documents. This arrived 2 hours ago. Emiline read quickly. Her aunt's handwriting was unmistakable. The letter accused the Duke of manipulation, claimed Emiline had been coerced, insisted the proposal had occurred under improper circumstances. She's trying to undo the engagement, Emiline whispered. Yes. Dashiell's tone was calm. She has sent similar letters to several influential families. Fear stirred in her chest. Can she succeed? No. The certainty in his voice steadied her slightly. Why not? Because I have already spoken with the Prime Minister this morning. Emiline blinked. You spoke with the Prime Minister about our engagement? I warned him Lady Ashby might attempt scandal. His expression remained cool. I prefer to prevent problems before they begin. The scale of his influence still startled her. She will not stop, Emiline said quietly. No. Dashiell sat across from her. But neither will I. His gaze held hers. You should understand something. What? This marriage will create enemies. Because of my aunt? Because of me. He spoke bluntly. My wealth and influence have always made others uneasy. And now? Now they will resent you as well. Emiline felt the weight of his words. Society had mocked her as a spinster, but being a duchess would not guarantee kindness. You regret proposing, she said softly. His eyes sharpened instantly. Never. Even if it complicates your life. My life was complicated long before you entered it. His voice softened slightly. You simply made it worth the trouble. A faint warmth spread through her chest. Still, something else troubled her. You mentioned enemies. Yes. Who? Dashiell hesitated briefly, then answered, Lady Clarissa Beaumont. Emiline frowned. I do not know the name. You will. His tone darkened slightly. She once believed she might become Duchess of Holston. Understanding dawned. And now she will hate me? Yes. He did not soften the truth. She is influential. Beautiful. Very accustomed to getting what she wants. Emiline considered this calmly. So society will soon test whether the spinster deserves her duke. Dashiell studied her expression. Does that concern you? A little. And yet? A small smile touched her lips. I survived 7 years under Lady Prudence. His eyes warmed faintly. An excellent point. A servant entered quietly with fresh tea. The moment the door closed again, Dashiell leaned forward slightly. There is one more matter. Her pulse quickened. What matter? Tonight. Tonight? The Countess of Wexford is hosting another gathering. Emiline stared at him. The same ballroom? Yes. Realization struck instantly. You intend to take me back there? I do. Her heart raced. After everything that happened last night? Especially after. Dashiell's voice grew calm and deliberate. Society must see that you are not hiding. That you are not ashamed. That the Duchess of Holston stands proudly where the spinster once stood. Emiline swallowed slowly. 300 eyes, more whispers, more judgment. Dashiell studied her carefully. You may refuse. I will not force you. She considered the offer only briefly, then lifted her chin. No. A faint spark appeared in his gray eyes. No? I will go. Her voice steadied. If they wish to stare, let them stare. Dashiell leaned back slightly. A rare smile touched his lips. I suspected you might say that. Emiline met his gaze. But this time, yes, I will not stand in the corner. His smile deepened faintly. No. He rose from his chair. This time, he offered his hand. You will stand beside me. The Countess of Wexford's ballroom glittered even brighter the following evening. Word of the scandal had spread through London like wildfire. Every noble household had heard the story. The feared Duke, the forgotten spinster, the proposal that had shaken the entire marriage market. No one intended to miss the aftermath. 300 guests gathered once again beneath the chandeliers, whispering behind fans and glasses of champagne. They were waiting to see if the rumors were true, waiting to see whether Emiline Thorne would dare return. The grand doors opened. Conversation stopped instantly. The Duke of Holston entered the ballroom, and at his side walked the future Duchess. Emiline stepped forward on his arm wearing deep emerald silk that shimmered beneath the candlelight. Diamonds glimmered softly at her throat, catching every flicker of flame above. But it was not the jewels that held the room's attention. It was her posture, her calm, her quiet, unshakable dignity. The spinster from the corner had vanished. In her place stood a woman no one could overlook. Whispers rippled through the crowd. That's her. Good heavens. She looks entirely different. Dashiell felt the tension in her arm and leaned closer. Breathe, he murmured softly. I am breathing. Good. They crossed the ballroom slowly. Every gaze followed them. Every whisper carried their names. And yet Emiline felt something remarkable. For the first time in 7 years, the whispers did not hurt, because she was no longer alone. Halfway across the room, a tall blonde woman stepped into their path. Lady Clarissa Beaumont. Her beauty was striking, her smile sharp, her eyes cold. So the rumors are true, she said smoothly. Her gaze swept over Emiline with thinly disguised judgment. The Duke has chosen a bride at last. Dashiell's arm stiffened slightly. Lady Clarissa, Your Grace. She curtsied with perfect grace. I must confess society was quite surprised by your announcement. I imagine it was. Her gaze returned to Emiline. One does wonder what quality finally captured the attention of England's most difficult bachelor. The insult hung delicately in the air. Emiline felt the old instinct rise, the urge to retreat, to apologize, to disappear. But Dashiell's hand tightened slightly over hers. A silent reminder, you are not alone. Emiline lifted her chin. You may wonder all you like, Lady Clarissa. Her voice remained calm, but the Duke has already answered that question. Clarissa's brow lifted faintly. Oh? Emiline turned toward Dashiell. His gaze softened the moment it met hers. He waited 7 years. A ripple of surprise passed through nearby listeners. Clarissa laughed lightly. How romantic. Her tone dripped with skepticism. Dashiell spoke quietly. Yes. The single word carried enormous weight. The room fell silent again. I waited 7 years, he repeated calmly, because the woman standing beside me was worth every moment of it. His gaze swept across the watching crowd. I suggest you remember that. Clarissa's smile faltered. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in her eyes. She curtsied stiffly. "Of course, Your Grace." Then she withdrew. The whispers returned immediately. But they had changed. No longer mocking. Now they carried something new. Respect, perhaps even admiration. The orchestra began another waltz. Dashiell looked down at Emiline. "Dance with me." Her breath caught. "You do not dance." "I do now." He led her toward the center of the floor. The guests parted again, creating space around them. The music swelled. Dashiell placed one hand at her waist. The other held hers gently. "Are you afraid?" he asked quietly. "A little." "Good." She blinked in surprise. "Good?" "It means the moment matters." The waltz began. They moved together slowly, gracefully. Every eye in the ballroom watched. But Emiline no longer cared. For 7 years she had dreamed of dancing in a ballroom. Tonight the dream felt strangely small compared to what she had gained. Dashiell's gaze remained fixed on her face. "You are thinking." "Yes." "What about?" She smiled softly. "I am wondering how long it will take for this to feel real." His expression warmed. "Perhaps another 7 years." She laughed quietly. "That seems excessive." "Then perhaps 7 days." "Better." The music slowed. The final notes faded, but neither of them stepped away. Dashiell lifted her gloved hand and pressed a gentle kiss against her fingers. "Not scandalous, not dramatic, just certain. I will spend the rest of my life proving you were worth the wait," he murmured. Emotion filled her chest. "And I will spend the rest of mine learning to believe it." His gray eyes softened completely then. For the first time since she had known him, the Granite Duke truly smiled. And across the ballroom, 300 witnesses understood something at once. The spinster they had mocked for 7 years had not merely found a husband. She had found a man who had loved her quietly, fiercely, patiently, long before the world ever noticed her. And that kind of love was stronger than gossip, stronger than scandal, stronger even than time. Because sometimes the greatest romances are not the ones that begin with fireworks. Sometimes they begin with patience, 7 long years of it, and the courage to finally step out of the shadows.